A decade ago, Seungri was the kind of name that didn't need a surname. A member of Big Bang, a face of an era, the maknae who felt like energy bottled into a grin. When Big Bang moved, K-pop moved with them. Stadium lights, luxury endorsements, international headlines. Seungri lived in the part of celebrity where consequences always seemed to land on someone else. Then one word started swallowing everything: Burning Sun. It wasn't a song title. It was a nightclub in Seoul, and the scandal around it roiled the K-pop industry like a fire you couldn't put out with a press release. Seungri was described as affiliated with the club, and the story that followed wasn't the kind you can outrun with a world tour. Here's the hook that keeps viewers watching. This isn't just Idol gets caught. This is a case file about how fame, money, nightlife, and power can build a private world where normal rules feel optional until the state steps in and makes the rules loud. If you only remember the headlines, you remember chaos, allegations, leaked messages, public outrage, and a rapid collapse of image. But Off-Camera Chronicles isn't here to stitch together rumors. We're here to rebuild the timeline the way a courtroom does, gate by gate, date by date, and only as far as the record allows. Because Seungri's downfall has something most celebrity scandals don't: a verified legal arc, a military court sentence, a Supreme Court decision, a prison term served, a release date. That's why this story is so addictive in the case file format. It has an ending, just not the kind the fans wanted. So we're telling it in 5 moves. Part 2. How Seungri built the K-pop Great Gatsby persona, nightlife entrepreneur, investor magnate, the idol who turned parties into profit. Part 3. How Burning Sun exploded in 2019 and why the scandal became bigger than one club. Part 4. The courtroom years. 9 charges, a 3-year sentence, then a reduced term upheld by the Supreme Court. Part 5. The aftermath. Release, public backlash, and the question no fandom wants to answer. What does legacy mean when the archive is permanent? Stay with the timeline. Because the real twist isn't that a superstar fell. The real twist is how many systems had to move, brands, police, courts, and public opinion, before the fall became irreversible. And if you're wondering why this story still pulls millions of views years later, it's because it compresses an entire era into one headline. The idol economy meets the nightlife economy, and the bill comes due in court. The audience doesn't just watch for drama, it watches for a lesson: how fast a perfect image can invert, and how little control a celebrity has once the process turns legal. And the most chilling part? The public didn't just watch the fall. It helped accelerate it, click by click, before any gavel ever hit wood. Seungri's public brand wasn't built like a typical idol brand. He wasn't only a performer, he was framed as a businessman, an operator who understood nightlife, networking, and the prestige economy. In a culture that treats VIP access like status, that persona is magnetic. It makes fans feel like their idol isn't just talented, but winning life. This matters because scandals are rarely born from one bad choice. They're born from an environment that rewards the same risky behavior again and again, until it becomes routine. Nightlife is a perfect example. Private rooms, private deals, private favors, and the constant pressure to impress investors who want more than music and alcohol. When money meets secrecy, the line between entertainment and arrangement can blur fast. Burning Sun entered the public mind as more than a club. It became a symbol of elite nightlife culture in Gangnam, glossy, exclusive, and increasingly rumored to be dangerous. Reuters described how K-pop-linked scandals in 2019 exposed a darker side of Seoul's flashiest district, including allegations involving drugs and sexual crimes tied to nightlife. And once a scandal has a symbol, it becomes a magnet. Everything gets pulled in: police handling, influencer ecosystems, corruption rumors, and the politics of who gets protected. In a case file story, that's where the tension forms. Is this one bad club or a window into a broader machine? Seungri's affiliation with Burning Sun turned him into the face of that machine in the public imagination, whether or not he controlled every detail. And this is where many viewers misunderstand the next phase. The public wants one villain. But investigations don't work like narratives. Investigations pull threads. They follow money. They examine messages. They ask who introduced whom, who paid, who arranged. That's why the business idol archetype matters here. The more a celebrity is framed as a mastermind, clubs, deals, VIP culture, the more the public assumes they understand the world they're operating in. In a scandal, that assumption becomes anger. People stop asking, was he careless, and start asking, was the system built on exploitation? And there's another layer, Big Bang's legacy. When one member is pulled into a scandal this severe, it doesn't just affect him. It drags an entire group history into the debate. Fans feel betrayed, casual listeners feel vindicated, and the industry learns a harsh truth. An idol isn't just a person. An idol is a brand network that can collapse like dominoes. So part 2 ends with the setup question that powers the rest of the timeline. When a celebrity brand is built on access, what happens when access becomes evidence? In early 2019, the Burning Sun scandal accelerated from club rumor into national obsession. The story expanded beyond one incident and became a wider controversy about what was happening behind velvet ropes: allegations of assault, drug facilitation, corruption, and the use of power to make complaints disappear. The moment the scandal hit mainstream attention, the rules changed. Police don't just investigate a crime, they investigate under a spotlight. Every delay becomes suspicious. Every denial becomes a headline. And every celebrity connected to the story becomes a target of public pressure. Reuters' 2019 fact box noted that Seungri was charged in connection with providing prostitutes to foreign investors, an allegation that helped push the scandal from nightclub mess into a serious legal issue. This is also where the language of the scandal became bigger than Seungri. Burning Sun turned into shorthand for an entire set of fears: that nightlife elites can operate with impunity, that victims are discouraged from reporting, and that influence can distort policing and oversight. Whether every fear was proven in court or not, the cultural damage was real, because people realized how little transparency exists behind VIP doors. And once that realization takes hold, the public no longer accepts the old celebrity rule of thumb: wait, forget, move on. Instead, it demands a record. And it demands charges. It demands an outcome that can't be rebranded. This is the turning point where a case file channel has to be disciplined. Because Burning Sun is not one clean storyline, it's a cluster of multiple investigations and multiple defendants. If you try to tell all of it, you lose the audience. The tighter approach is to keep the lens on Seungri's arc while acknowledging the scandal's wider blast radius. So here's how Seungri's timeline changes in Part 3. He stops being just an entertainer. He becomes a public figure under investigation in a scandal that roiled the industry, language even mainstream outlets used to describe the scale of damage. This is also where cultural court starts handing out punishment faster than legal court. Brands distance. Appearances vanish. The public starts reading silence as guilt and statements as strategy. In K-pop, where fandom is organized and reputations are carefully engineered, that pressure is nuclear. But the case file doesn't end with outrage. It moves into procedure. It moves into charges. It moves into courts. And that's where the story gets colder, quieter, and more final. Part 3 ends with the feeling viewers remember most: a superstar's image collapsing in real time, while the legal system begins moving in slow motion behind closed doors. The legal phase of Seungri's story is where myth meets paperwork. In August 2021, Reuters reported that a South Korean military court sentenced Seungri to 3 years in prison and ordered him to pay a fine of 1.15 billion won after finding him guilty of 9 charges. The charges reported included items such as embezzlement, overseas gambling, and procuring prostitutes for foreign investors. That sentence is not just a number. It's the moment a celebrity scandal becomes a legal identity. A famous name becomes the defendant, and the timeline becomes dates, rulings, and appeals, not fan edits and rumors. Then came the shift that many casual viewers miss. The sentence was later reduced on appeal, and in May 2022, the Supreme Court upheld a 112-year prison term, finding Seungri guilty of all 9 charges connected to the Burning Sun scandal. That Supreme Court decision is the door click in this story. Because once the top court upholds the term, the case stops being ongoing. It becomes history. Notice what the timeline does here. It strips the story of drama. No matter what fans argue online, the court's outcome is fixed. That's why this scandal became a template in Korea's entertainment world. It showed that even a top-tier idol could be processed through a system that doesn't care about fandom. For retention, this is the clean case file spine you can flash on screen as a timeline graphic. 2019 scandal breaks, 2021 military court sentence, 2022 Supreme Court upholds 18 months, 2023 release. It's 4 beats that viewers can remember, and each beat tightens the sense that the story is moving toward a locked ending. One more detail that keeps the narration grounded. The Supreme Court ruling didn't describe a celebrity scandal. It upheld a prison term on specific charges, confirming the lower court's findings. That's the moment you remind the viewer. Fame can argue in headlines, but it can't argue with a final ruling. Part 4 ends with the final countdown, not to a comeback, but to release, because prison time ends, but reputational time rarely does. In February 2023, major Korean outlets reported that Seungri was released after completing his 18-month prison term, including the Yeoju Correctional Institution reference reported by Korea Jungang Daily and the Korea Herald. That release date is a clean ending on paper. But culturally, it's the start of a different story. What happens when an idol returns to a world that no longer agrees on what he represents? Because in modern scandal culture, prison is not the final punishment. The final punishment is the permanent association. Search results, timelines, and the way every future headline drags the past into the present. Seungri's legacy now lives in 3 competing frames. For some, he is a cautionary tale about nightlife power and how quickly celebrity can rot from the inside. For others, he is proof that the idol economy, brands, platforms, investors, can build a myth too big to question until it collapses. And for the industry, he is a case study in risk. How one person's scandal can infect an entire company, an entire group history, and an entire era of K-pop. Here's the part that makes this episode loop back to the beginning. Burning Sun wasn't just a scandal about one club. It was a scandal about access, who gets it, who sells it, and what people are willing to trade for it. If you want the episode to stick in the viewer's mind, end on the idea that justice and closure are not the same. Courts can close a case. Culture keeps reopening it. And Burning Sun became the kind of cultural reference that gets triggered whenever K-pop faces another scandal, because it represents a public fear that fame can create distance from consequences. So the real legacy isn't only one former idol's sentence. It's the shift in how audiences watch celebrity, with suspicion first and trust only after proof. That shift changes everything. How agencies manage risk, how brands choose ambassadors, how fans defend their favorites, and how quickly a platform can flip from promotion to erasure. So the last question isn't, will he return? It's bigger and darker. When a system rewards VIP culture, secrecy, and status, how many more Burning Suns does it produce before the next case file opens? That's the off-camera ending. File closed in court. Archive still open in culture.